Hey fellow woodcutters, Topsaw here. Today I was going to do a quick video on joinery, kind of a follow-up on a short I did. A lot of different joints. I'll just introduce them and show some of the ways they're made. This is not an exhaustive list, but kind of a starter and like an intro to woodworking class and get started on making things. Our first joint, probably the easiest one to make, is a butt joint where you just butt two boards together like that. And then a good way to attach those two boards is with pocket holes or pocket hole screws. You can kind of see them in there. Our next joint for a picture frame is a miter joint, just like that. There's a little bit larger glue area, not a very strong joint at all. Usually when I'm done with a miter joint and a glue up, I usually try and put a spline across here for additional strength. When you're doing joinery or woodworking, it really helps to think of that wood, this wood, not this plywood, but wood in general, as a bundle of straws. And you can see with this bundle of straws that I could probably break them this way, but this way, they're really strong under compression. So the advantage of a rabbet joint like this is that you're not using the fasteners, the nails, to support the whole board. You're using the fibers of the wood to support it, and it's like on a bundle of straws, especially with hardwoods. Okay, then our next joint after that is a dado. It's this groove cut out right here. And it'll fit right in there. Also for shells, the same idea that you're using the wood under compression to make it strong. We also have a lap joint where you cut two big rabbets like that, and then they go together this way, and that'll give you a lap joint, a pretty big glue surface. It also has the ability of a shoulder so that it won't really fail that way. Another joint, well, the same joint as a dado. This dado right here is actually cut on the bevel. I have two different bevels, and this is actually like a display board with the dado cut there, the board inset, so it'll lean back a little bit for some measurement cards I have. So let's say I'm building a box right here, and here are the sides of my box. So I have rabbets at the top and the bottom like that, and I'll show you kind of why this is a better joinery than just using butt joints. So I've cut rabbets on all four right there on the end pieces. There's an increased glue surface, which is going to make it stronger. Then my fasteners go through here if I need them, or I could just clamp it and let the glue hold it, and it'll be plenty. Learning how to build strong boxes is really key. I mean, if you're doing cabinets, everything in a cabinet is just boxes. If you're building homes, it's also just a series of boxes. So building with boxes and knowing how to build strong boxes is kind of key to building anything in wood. So if I build a box like this, whether it's a jewelry box, a house, or a cabinet, it is not going to fail under compression, right? No matter how much direct force I put down here, these grains right here are not going to compress, right? Keep thinking of these straw bundles. So it is not going to fail under compression. However, if you look at homes that have failed in earthquakes or homes that have failed pretty much anywhere, you look at them and they're all kind of pancaked over like that. And that's actually called racking. So in an earthquake, what happens is the ground's moving sideways. Once you start to have a little bit of that movement, the vector forces are being transferred from going down to the side. So now once it just goes a little bit, and now I put downward force on there, the downward force is not putting that grain under compression, but rather is pushing it over, and that's why things rack. If this is a well-fastened joint, one of the nice things about rabbets is you have this shoulder right here. So for this thing to fail here, to rack, if it was held tight, and this gap right here was not allowed to happen because it was a glued surface, for it to rack, this wood would have to push through this grain. I mean, it would have to push this grain in under compression, and that's why it's a stronger joint. A lot of ways to cut these. You could cut them with a router bit. You cut them with a table saw and then just chisel out the rest of it. Or you could use a dado blade stack to cut these rabbets or dados out. Let's bring the camera over to the table saw where I have a dado stack in there, and I'll show you how to cut some of these. I don't want this video to be about dado stacks, but safety is always number one on everything. This is a saw stop, best table saw ever built. I love this thing. Before I change my blade out to a dado stack like this, positively lock it out in two separate places, both the power switch and prevent power going to it. If you're changing your blade out to a dado stack like this, on a saw stop, you've got to change the clutch mechanism, which is easy to do. You just put in a new clutch that's designed for the dado. And then I'm using this dado stack here. So this is a nice dado stack. Look up on this sheet, the width of my dado, and then I set it accordingly. When you change the blade out, again, you got to change the clutch mechanism out and the throat plate, and you're going to have to remove the overhead guard because these are going to be non-through cuts. I set this dado stack right here at a 1/2 inch, but that doesn't make me only cut a 1/2 inch. Let me cut a rabbet first, the length of the board, and then I'll use a miter gauge to cross cut a rabbet at the end of a board. So again, I got a dado stack in here, a 1/2 inch wide. If I only want a 1/4 inch rabbet cut in here, then I would just set that accordingly and only do a 1/4 inch wide rabbet this way. Positively use a push stick all the way through. You want to stay firm down and firmly up against that fence, fingers far and away. Have your safety glasses on. Right there, there's a 1/4 inch wide rabbet down the length of the board. The height, this height right here, is going to be determined by the height of the blade. So I bring that blade up higher to make this deeper, or bring the blade down lower. Now let's say on this side, I don't want a 1/4, I want a 3/4 inch rabbet over here. What I'm going to do is I'm going to bring my fence so far over that it's going to create a dado instead. And that dado will have a 1/4 inch sticking out. So I cut to the width I want, 3/4 first. So I'm 3/4 wide on that dado. Remember, this is a rabbet, this is a dado. I'm 3/4 wide, and then I do the cleaning cut to take out this extra 1/4 inch. I'm just going to move the fence over and take out that 1/4 inch to be able to get a 3/4 inch wide rabbet. So I got a 1/2 inch stack. I could get a 1/4 inch wide rabbet, or I get 3/4, any kind of dimension I want. So let me do that. So there it is. There's my 1/4, there's my 3/4. Again, the depth of this is set by the height of the blade. Now that we've done rips along the length of the grain, I'm now going to do cross cuts to also get a rabbet on the end here. Line it up right there. Make sure the fence is out of the way. Never have the miter gauge and the fence interact with each other, or you'll create a bind. I'm going to just cross cut this to get a cross cut rabbet on the end. There's my rabbet right on the end of that. See how it came out right there? I'll just show you one last technique right here. Okay, the last technique I'll go over right here is a stop block. And this is really important on safety. The stop block is on the fence, far back from that blade, so that when I go by from the stop block forward, there's no bind between my board and the fence. There's a big gap here. If the stop block is forward, you're going to create a bind and get a kickback. So the stop block has to be way back here. I'm going to clamp it in place. And if I want symmetry on both sides of this, let's say I want a full dado on this side and another one on this side, and they're symmetrical, I'm going to come right here to my stop block. I am off of that stop block. Right? There's a big gap here before I engage the blade. All the way through. Reverse it. And that'll allow me to cut symmetrical dados. Again, all the way through is a dado. Only part of the way like this is a rabbet. If I want symmetry, I could use a stop block clamp to the fence, making sure it's way back at the front of the saw so that I don't engage it when I go near the blade. All right, let me just go over those key points one more time. This is a dado stack put into a saw stop table saw. Before I do any of this, I'm completely trained in person in a wood shop. These are somewhat intermediate techniques, so you need good primary woodworking skills to start with, how to use a table saw. Don't ever change the blade out until you have the power disconnected. You need a double lockout, and then you also need to change the clutch mechanism before you put that dado stack in. So there's a clutch that goes with the dado blade on the saw stop. This right here on the side is a rabbet, and the groove through the middle is a dado. With a 1/2 inch wide dado stack, I could really cut any width in a rip on a rabbet, right? I could only use a little bit of the blade, or I could do multiple passes to get whatever width I want, and the height is set with the height of the blade or the depth. On the actual dado, I could do a 1/2 inch or greater than with multiple passes, but I will not be able to do less than a 1/2 inch groove with a 1/2 inch stack, but I could always do multiple passes to make it wider. If you can use a stop block, make sure it's way forward on the fence so that you never engage the miter gauge and the fence together. Otherwise, that'll give you a bind and a kickback, which is really dangerous. Safety has to be the #1 priority, so make sure you know what you're doing before you even start and that all your tools are safe and inspected. Thank you for watching. Please comment below if you have any questions or concerns, or if you do any of these joints in different ways, or if you have other joints that you'd like me to go over. Thank you for watching. If you're new to the channel, think about subscribing. This channel is all things wood, from tree work to woodwork.